Yeah. You can force people, but what they're doing is they're trying to just protect their life. So do just enough, but they're not going to be fully engaged because they don't feel like you're for them.
Mm,
Or the other end is support, rah rah, helicopter parents. Hi, it's Tyler. Hey, what do you need? And it's like over support. But
yeah,
the best leaders in the world bring high support first because that's established like, hey, I'm for you. But then unbelievable challenge.
yeah.
It's like, no. I'm not going to let you, I'm not coddling you. It's not kumbaya. It's high support with high challenge.
Welcome to the Elevate podcast. I'm your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. Thank you for tuning in. And whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you're in the right place. My guest this episode is the president and CEO of Giant Impact and a founding partner of the Giant Companies. For the past 2 decades, he has been growing and leading domestic and international companies that value people over processes and integrity above all else. He leads the global leadership event and training company at Giant. He's the author of several books, one of which I personally love, The Peace Index, which we talk a bit about here. He also works with the University of Oklahoma Athletics and University of Oklahoma Football. Welcome to the Elevate podcast, Jeremie Kubicek. Jeremie, how are you doing today?
Brother, I'm doing great, man. Good to see you.
Uh,
I'm fired up for a new year. You?
I'm fired up as well. Fired up to have you. Excited to have you share a little bit about what you do and in your work. And thanks for taking some time to join us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Well, yeah. I guess to first start off to introduce some of our listeners, tell us a little bit about Giant and kind of what led you to your work in your life along your journey to the work that you do.
Yeah, so I've been in the leadership space for a long time, and my view of leadership is probably different. So I'm an entrepreneur. I've started over 30 companies since I was 21, and I've lived in Russia, London, Atlanta, live in Oklahoma. I've kind of gone, came back, gone, came back,
Yeah.
came back 3 times. And so, but I just have this like view of like how things should be. And I like to help cynical know-it-alls. I like to help adults who have attention issues and maybe don't read much. I've I like to create things that help them become the leaders that they've always wanted to be, but never knew how to be.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. So I create content that we scale. We've got about 877 to be exact coaches and consultants and working in about 115 countries. And I basically create content that they use inside companies like Google, Starbucks, Pfizer,
Yeah.
all those types of businesses. And then inside sports and college and universities as well. So it's kind of a unique
Yeah.
role.
Eh, In kind of your travels around the globe, um, what do you see maybe there key differences that stick out in how they lead in Europe and other places you've been than our tendencies in America?
Well, really, it comes down to like the culture of the country. So, like, I lived in London for a few years, so it's like the caste system
Hmm.
of like, oh yes, Tyler, tell me about your family. So it's all predicated on your family and where your family is in the pecking order.
Yeah.
Then that defines your opportunities, which
Interesting.
is what I love about America. Is like,
Yeah.
and specifically, I moved back to Oklahoma because it's a very pioneering state. It's
Mhm.
like, well, who says you can't?
Yeah.
And in America, we like, yeah, we can do it and try it. If we fail, let's try something else, right? And that's not, there's not as much chances to fail in Europe.
Gotcha.
Failure is like if you get blackballed as a failure, you're done for the
Mm.
rest of your life. Long
Less,
memories.
no recovery.
And then you get into Russia, anything that was a former communist, we're seeing it right now. Like they have bad habits and bad governance and they have systemic corruption
Yeah.
that is in this culture of domination, that you basically, the only way you get things done is through power, just alpha dog brute force. And that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It works short term, but long term, it's not motivating. People don't, people are compliant
Yeah.
in those countries. They're not engaged.
Right. When you think about countries on a macro big level and bring it down to just kind of the teams and workplaces that we engage, uh, you do a lot of your work, I think, with the teams and things together. Why is it important that we do take the opportunity as organizations and teams, not just to grow as individuals, which is important, but to grow together and to experience things together?
Um, I mean, well, let me break it down how I view it. I view teams, and you think about, let's take organizations, and then we'll get into sports teams.
Sure.
But you view teams as units, and a unit can either work together and do something good, or they don't work, and everyone has to work around them. And so what we have is we have a systemic issue of poor team leadership inside organizations, because everyone is so wanting to go fast, but they don't do the fundamentals of unit building, of core team unit building.
Yeah.
And therefore, then they complain that it's not working. Like, no, you have a bad team leader.
Yeah.
You have a bad, they're just not, or they're so under such pressure that they can't do the fundamentals. So you skipped over it and expecting people to perform at these high levels, but they're not doing the basics.
Sure. Basics always work.
They do, man.
Yeah,
Always.
right. I see in sports a lot, especially in the high school, college environment, where people get thrust into leader positions because of talent. Happens, occasionally in their workplace as well, where they get promoted based on previous, results. Uh, and then they're asked to lead, and sometimes to no fault of their own, they lack some skills. What are the ones that usually people are seeking to acquire, uh, or hungry for when they first become leaders?
Well, it's the most needed skills, I would say, are number one's communication. It's the ability to know your team, to lead your team. So it's understanding who they are and what's their wiring and personality, and then being able to speak their language, not your own language. So, the idea is like, hey, do unto others as you would want done gets misinterpreted sometimes. People go, well, look, man, I didn't get training. Why do you need training? Or I don't need all that. Why do you? Well, they're
Yeah.
different personality. They're different wiring. So you've got to know your people to lead them. Are they a thinker? Are they a feeler? How are they processing information? And you got to do more work up front in order to really establish communication. That's number one. Then you start getting into influence and trust,
Yeah.
building true influence and building trust. I'm for you, right? And I'm fighting for your highest possible good. And that becomes something that they do. Then you get into strategic alignment, how to get people in the right, working on the right
Sure.
project at the right
Sure.
time. Then you can get into execution. But most bosses are like, hey, look, man, let's just get on the same page, right? Come on.
Yeah.
Now make it happen. Let's go. Get
Yeah.
on the same page, make it happen. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And then when it doesn't happen, then they're like, losers, let's get rid of them. And it
Yeah.
becomes a turnover factory.
Yeah.
And they just bring in another and another.
And I think tell me if you disagree, but it burns my ears whenever I hear coaches ask for buy-in. When they give me buy-in, I want buy-in, or the problem was I didn't get buy-in. Uh, what they really want is a relationship and trust. Um, they've mislabeled it, maybe based on experiences, but when people are searching to build trust, what are some of the key things that they can do when they have maybe brand new people that they're expected to lead?
Yeah. So we call it an influence model, and there's kind of four C's. There's character, and chemistry on one side. That's feeling. There's competency and credibility on the other side.
Mm.
So depending on who you are, so if you're a thinker, then what you want is you go, hey, does this guy know what he's doing? Is he competent?
Right.
And then is he credible? Is he consistent? And I can trust him and he's going to do the work. Hey, you know what? Competent, credible person. Awesome. Character, though, this guy, I don't want to be around him. And in chemistry, it's all about himself. Man. So I got a plus here with competency. I got a plus with credibility, but his character stinks. No one likes him. No one wants to be around him. Chemistry's off.
Yeah.
I got two pluses, two negatives. I can't. So what they're really doing is they're like, well, we need all four to develop true trust
Sure.
transactionally.
Yeah.
Like he knows what he's doing. He's consistent. He's a good guy, and everyone likes him. Let's go all day long. That's when trust gets developed. So we teach players that. We teach coaches that. And the problem is that you have coaches sometimes with, if you're in sports, you have coaches that might be competent and might be credible, but no one trusts them, and then they don't like them, and so they're not getting 100% of the player.
Right.
They're just enough to keep their position.
Most definitely. One of the things we like to do occasionally here is go back and look at a previous tweet. So looking back, a tweet of yours I pulled that I wanted you to expand on a little bit. You had put out there, if you learn to manage your emotions so that others don't have to manage your emotions, your influence will rise fast. Can you talk about how important that emotional regulation is as a leader?
Well, there's this skill that used to be something called self-awareness, and that used to be something that we all like revered. And it's like social media has just casted it out, right? It's like the most important thing. So like, wouldn't it be nice if I can manage my own emotions so that you don't have to manage my own emotions? That's the idea. And when that happens in today's world, self-aware people that used to be just the basics, now self-aware person, people are like, oh wow, that guy's solid.
Yeah.
Just because he's managing his own emotions, or she.
Yeah.
And like that to me is like just important. So it's noticeable now.
Yeah.
Like if I see someone who's like, hey guys, you know what? I just want to say I screwed up last week. My bad. I was going through some things and I was processing. So anyway, I just wanted you to know. I'm like, dude, come on. Your influence rises with me.
Yeah. I think you kind of touched on one of my favorite things to talk about too is where vulnerability plays into that as a leader. And just like you said, you got to be vulnerable to, yeah, I was off, whatever it might be. Can you talk about how vulnerability can help us build trust and create leadership?
I mean, to be vulnerable with others, if you think about it, sometimes people are too vulnerable. You can be over and under everything.
Right.
Appropriately vulnerable means that you have to be vulnerable with yourself.
Yeah.
You start with yourself, and you look in a mirror and like, oh my gosh, I got broccoli in here. How long has this broccoli been in my teeth? 22 years. What? So you're like, oh my gosh. And so you're willing to get your own broccoli out of your own teeth.
Yeah.
So the way that we do it at Giant, we use visual tools. And one of the tools it's the infinity loop. And it's basically know yourself, lead yourself. So it's tendencies. Do you know the tendencies that you have? And the tendencies lead to patterns. Patterns have an action. I'll just be vulnerable and I'll show you what I mean. When you figure out and solve, oh my goodness, like I have a potential to exaggerate. I have a tendency to exaggerate.
Yeah.
And my pattern, when does it happen? Is why does it happen? Well, I'm trying to win an argument or impress someone. So what do I do? What's the action? I'll add 3 to a conversation. I'm like, all right, well, what are the consequences of that? Well, people will check it out, or people are like, that doesn't feel really seriously. Then what's the reality? I create doubt in people when I didn't need to.
Sure.
So to be vulnerable is for you to realize the broccoli in your teeth and talk about it with your team in a way where they then can start to look at their own broccoli in their own teeth, and they start creating their own tendency log. I have 29 tendencies. I can overshare. I can name drop. I can want honor. These are things I've figured out about myself.
Yeah.
So that's basically a self-awareness journey.
Yeah.
That means when I'm to that point, I have nothing to prove. I have nothing to lose and nothing to hide. I've overcome self-preservation at that point. At that point, what are you going to do with to me? You you're like, all right, this guy is legit.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
So when
Follow.
I say something, it means something, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm striving to. I'm not saying I am perfect at that, but that's an example.
I love to, I think, like I got 29 of these, right? I think, oftentimes, or especially in the athletic world where people are being evaluated and feel like they're constantly judged sometimes, uh, diving in to some of those inadequacies or blind spots per se, whatever you want to label them, can be a challenge. And a lot of times when I've asked athletes who's the most critical of them, they raise their hand and tell me that they are that
Yeah.
themselves. They're the most critical.
Yeah.
But then when it's time to do a one-page assessment, they kind of back away from being the
Yeah.
critical. And I love diving into that with them. And when are you critical? It's usually when things are going bad and it's kind of off balance. But it's one thing I love about the peace index and just kind of going through it. And one, the tangibility of the numbers, the simplicity, and really being able to kind of use it as a tool. But
Mm-hmm.
one, can you talk a little bit about why just sometimes slowing down and actually doing some assessment, some
Mm-hmm.
self-assessing that our world is resistant of, uh,
Yeah.
can open up so much for us, not only as people, but as leaders?
Yeah. So we've been using the Peace Index for ever. Steve Cochran and I kind of built this tool, and the idea of the Peace Index is that every single person has a number over their head, and the number goes up and down every day. And so if you're listening to this, you have a number over your head right now. And that number could be a 62, 78, 88, 84, 91, whatever. And it shifts up and down. Well, the problem with most people are that we've allowed chaos to kind of come in and reign and cause us to be general whiners. And I'm generalizing here, but I'm like, man, why can't they? Why don't they? Why won't they? Like just general whining. I'm like, no, no, no,
Well,
no. Let's get into specifics. So we created a peace index to help people figure out specifically what is your level of peace. That's the number of your head right now. And so if you want to listen and play the game, it's real simple. There's 5 circles. There's purpose. How good do you feel? And have you taken it?
yeah. Well, so I'll be honest. I read the book, mentally went through it, came home, told my wife that I want us to do it together
Okay. You
as
want
an
to be
activity.
vulnerable and
Yeah.
take it right now?
Yeah, if we have time. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
You want a calculator? It'll be real fast. You got a calculator? You got your
Yeah.
phone,
Yeah.
or you can write it
I
down.
remember, yeah, I remember I made some notes. I
Okay,
don't
here
know
we
if I
go.
did them all, but yeah.
Here we go. Tyler, this is going to be your opportunity. We're going to find out what the number over your head is.
All right.
Okay. In fact, I've got a calculator. You can tell me and I'll add it up.
All right.
So, 1 through 100, how good do you feel about your purpose? And purpose is what you're doing. How much is what you're doing align with who you are? What
Um,
number?
87.
87. You can do 87.4 if you want, but that's right. 87. Next is people, the top 10 people that you spend the most time with. So, how good do you feel? What's your level of peace with the people in your life right now?
75.
75. All right. Let's go into place. Place are your spaces. It's your living room, house, backyard, your office, your how good do you feel about your space location right now?
Say 68.
68. See, we're getting somewhere. Now there's all questions that start popping up. Then you get into personal health. Personal health is mental, physical, spiritual, a combination of all three. How good do you feel about
90.
90? Come on. There we go. And then the last one is provision, which is your earnings. It's like, it's not what you want to earn, but what you need. How much are your needs being met? How good do you feel about your provision right now?
Say 80.
80. Okay. At 80. Then we add them all up. We divide by 5. You're at 80% right now. That's the number over your head.
Right.
So then you go, all right, but there was something in that. What you look for is you look for the lowest.
Yeah.
So if I'm coaching you, I'm like going, all right, Tyler, what's up with the space and
Yeah.
place? Is it your neighbor? Is it your house needs some work? Is it you haven't gotten your office set? What is it that's not like
Yeah.
right? And then what you do is you make a list of controllables on one column and uncontrollables on another.
Yeah.
Like control what you can control. What are the things that you can do
Yeah.
to change it? And that's ultimately
Definitely.
an assessment. It's not just an assessment. It's like you can do something with it.
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah.
have a conversation with someone, and your number goes from an 80 to an 85 pretty easily.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the one thing I also loved about it is it's like you take a lot of assessments, sometimes it just leaves you with a number feeling stuck. It's
Yeah.
not, and I think that next step, like you talk about the direction and yeah, I work from home and kids were at home a lot during break and, family things come up when you're at home. And so that's the challenge in my environment.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but there are things I could do better to limit those distractions and times and create boundaries and things like that. Um,
So
when
that's your
you,
date night conversation too. It's great for date nights
for sure.
because it's objective. Now it's like, hey, here's my piece index. We have common language.
Yeah.
It's we can do stuff about it. So it starts to make sense, right? So
Yeah. And I think that was just the thought that reoccurred while reading it was, yes, my wife, I was curious of, where she felt in these areas, as a husband, but also the other people in my 10 people, right? Like, where are they, and am I,
yep.
am I one of the people that helps them? And, I think it was kind of just maybe some of that back end evaluation of how's my index impacting other
Yes.
people, was just some of the other, I think, just reflecting that
And
happened
that
in,
was
in
a
reading it.
that was a tweet quote right there too of like, don't let someone else's lack of peace affect your level of peace.
Right.
And if someone else is really low, and they can't bring you down.
Right.
And so much of that happened over the last few years. But
Yeah.
we've done this. Peace Index is really helpful. Student athletes love it. Um, Another one that we use for student athlete, it goes deeper. It's called it's the Elite Athlete Index. And we created an elite athlete index that's a culmination of mind, body, and spirit.
Mm.
So what it is, it's mental, physical, and then just the soul, just the
Sure.
life part. And what you do is the coach takes the assessment for the player, and the player takes it for themselves, and then they talk about it together. And
Yeah.
so what happens is, a lot of times with coaches, they're like, "Hey Tyler, how you doing, man? How's it going?"
Good.
And yeah, good. Yeah, me good. All
Yeah.
right. And then someone else comes to him from student services and like, hey man, he's just not doing what? No, I just talked to him. He's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're
Totally.
like, no, you don't understand that this stress is leading to this stress, which is affecting this. So it's cause and effect. And you need to understand where it is. So it's not to give them a number that's like, you're horrible. It's actually a system to give them something that they can talk about with the coach or address and like, yeah, I've got some stuff going on at home. It's just showing up
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And so,
I think one of the things I find myself with athletes is maybe sometimes when they do open up and assess themselves is get them also to, I think the next thing sometimes they becomes overwhelming when they self-assess is that I have to get to perfect in every one of these. I was a 7, a 5, a 6, and how do I got to be a 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. And it becomes overwhelming to even think about how to do that. And I think the big thing is focus on 5 to 6, 6 to 7, just those little jump ups and become consistent to that point. What is the kind of advice that you kind of give after they kind of have some index numbers to make some
yeah,
movement?
we're actually playing with even moving away. I've shown you some numbers, but we're playing with color coding. and just going, hey, just get in the green,
Mm-hmm.
the light green, dark green. Here right now, you're yellow with
Yeah.
maybe orange.
Yeah.
We got to get you into the light green. And it's just like it changes the psychology a little bit of it. But you're right. Just some personalities fixate on certain numbers because that's all they've known. It's performance, right? And the
Yeah.
performance number. Well, the problem with numbers is they're subjective.
Right.
Like, what do you think of that movie?
Right.
I gave it a 7. What? I gave it a 9. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My 7 is a 9. I never give a 9,
Right. Right.
right?
It's like the guy,
So
barstool guy judging pizza, right? He's got his scale.
that's right.
You know, when you do, from your experience, like especially like kind of that student athlete, college athlete age, with the five P's, where do you see that sometimes they struggle the most?
Yeah. A lot of them, well, a lot of them don't really know their purpose. So here's where they
They're
struggle.
young. They're young. Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
young, but their purpose has been to make it to D1, maybe make it to the NFL. Well, but the percentages to
Yeah.
get to the NFL are so low. So a lot of guys will lose their purpose. I was with one athlete who's moved in the transfer portal from OU. He was he was the guy his entire life, all through high school. He's the guy. He gets to OU, the big program, and he's not the guy. In fact, he's not even close to being the guy. And now he's a transfer, and now he's transferred to a really low Division 2 school. And it's hard.
Yeah.
And so it's hard on their purpose because their
Yeah.
purpose was to go to the NFL. That dream might be over. So you have to think purpose outside of athletics
Yeah.
and think of it broader than
Yeah.
that. Um,
As I was,
um,
I think my other kind of reflection was the student athlete transition. When you go through them, it's like, yeah, they're young, they're figuring out their purpose. They've just moved to a new place. That's a little chaotic. They've got a lot of new people in their life. There's I know athletes are trying to figure out their provisions. How do I get my meals, my schedule? you know,
yes,
make sure that's set. And then personal health sometimes takes a back seat as they're making all these adjustments in life, as student athletes and trying to maintain a new schedule. So it's something that I think is just so valuable to go through, because it's like, man, you become high school to college, is your score can change fast.
totally.
And I think also it speaks to, going through the recruiting process, thinking of those five P's.
Yeah,
How
totally.
how is this going to look when I over here and over here? Um,
We we've been taking the five voices is something we created, which is personality. We took Myers-Briggs apart, made it simpler
mhm.
and more easy to remember. And it's based off of Carl Jung and Ellsworth. So if you know that you're a pioneer, or you know if you're a nurturer or a guardian, it's so important for coaches to know who they are and then communicate with their players. Oh, I've got a thinker coming in, or I've got a feeler coming in, and I'm a thinker coach. Then it's almost like we used plants. We got like there's 5 different kind of plants here. There's a cactus. A cactus doesn't need much water. And coach, you're a cactus, but you got a ficus that you're bringing onto your team. They're going to
Yeah,
shed leaves fast if they
yeah,
don't get sunlight and water in the right ways, right? Some attention. And they don't know how to. So it really worked with them. Well, we're doing that for recruiting too. So we're like going, okay, mom is a nurturer, dad's a pioneer, the player is a creative. Yeah, those are different dynamics. And so it goes into like personality science inside recruiting.
definitely.
It's really fascinating.
Well, last question as we wrap up. One of the other things I love you get into, and I think it's important for we find the people we surround ourselves with. Can you talk just a little bit about the importance of the high support and the high challenge, and why those are the kind of optimum type of people we want to
Yeah.
surround ourselves with?
Yeah. So most people are really good at either one. High challenge is what most coaches are like, get your head out, Tyler. Let's go, man. Get on in that
Yeah,
traditional. And so fear is the motivator, but most people are like, yeah, that didn't work very long. because all it leads is abdication. It's like communism. Yeah, yeah, you can force people, but what they're doing is they're trying to just protect their life. So do just enough, but they're not going to be fully engaged because they don't feel like you're for them.
Yeah.
Or the other end is support, rah rah, helicopter parents. Hi, it's Tyler. Hey, what do you need? And it's like over support. But
Yeah.
the best leaders in the world bring high support first because that's established like, hey, I'm for you. But then unbelievable challenge.
Yeah.
It's like, no, 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 no. I'm not going to let you, I'm not coddling you. It's not kumbaya. It's high support with high challenge. And I've been able to work with Brent Venables. I'm coaching him. And Coach Venables is an example of that. Unbelievably for you, but oh my goodness,
Yeah.
he will bring it. And
Yeah.
the players love it because they're like, they know he's for them ultimately, but he also knows he's not going to keep them there. He's going to push them to the
Yeah.
highest level. But it's this line, it's calibration. And
Definitely.
some days you need more support, and some days you need more challenge. So, as a leader, if you're listening, then you just want to master knowing what support looks like and knowing what challenge looks like. But it depends on their personality type of the other person.
Definitely.
Because thinkers don't want too much kumbaya or support. Feelers need a lot more of it.